There are moments in life when we stand at the edge of our strength, when all that we thought we could endure has pressed us down to the last inch of hope. We pray, we plead, and still the silence of heaven seems to linger. It is in those very moments that we are tempted to believe that we have been abandoned, that our cries have been carried into the air only to vanish. But what we often forget is that God does not always answer with a voice from the clouds or a miracle that breaks the laws of nature. More often than not, His help comes walking toward us in the quiet disguise of another human being, someone we have never met, someone whose name we do not yet know, someone who will arrive at just the right moment, as though heaven itself had written their path. We live in a world that thrives on the illusion of self-sufficiency. We are taught to build our walls, fight our battles, and conquer our fears alone. Yet God has never designed us to walk this earth in isolation. From the beginning, His plan has been woven through the lives of others. The very answer to your prayer may not fall from the sky, but it may sit beside you on a bus, shake your hand in a waiting room, or cross your path in an hour when you feel most unseen. That stranger could be the one God has chosen to carry the thread of hope back into your life. Think about it. When you read the old stories of faith, you find that deliverance rarely came as expected. The wanderer in the desert was not sustained by his own strength, but by bread that fell from above. The weary prophet was not lifted by his own resolve, but by the hands of those God sent along the way. Even the greatest king was not spared the need for others. His crown was never a mark of self-reliance, but of trust in a God who often sent help through unexpected messengers. So why should we think it any different for us? Help may not look like what you imagined. It may come wrapped in humility. It may speak with an accent unfamiliar. It may offer kindness in a form you were not expecting. God delights in surprising us with His mercy, for in that surprise our faith grows. A stranger who steps into your life at the right time is not an accident. It is a signature of divine authorship. The hand that reaches for yours may be ordinary, but the love that placed it there is eternal. And so, when despair tempts you to believe you are forgotten, remember this: your prayers are not lost. They are carried into the heart of God, and in His time He will send help. Perhaps not from the person you expected, perhaps not from the place you predicted, but from someone you've never met, someone who has been prepared, even without their knowing, to be the answer to your cry. God's answers often arrive not through miracles from the sky, but through ordinary people placed in our path at the right time. We are not designed for isolation. God weaves His help into the lives of others who cross our journey. Help may come in unexpected forms, wrapped in humility, through strangers we never thought to notice. Every unexpected act of kindness carries the signature of divine authorship. The challenge is not whether God will send help, but whether we will recognize His hand when it arrives. There are many people who live their days expecting God's answers to come in thunderous moments, in the shaking of the earth, or in the dazzling display of something that could only be described as miraculous. But the truth, so often overlooked, is that the miracles of God are frequently clothed in the ordinary. His answers are not always carved in lightning across the sky, or sung by choirs of angels descending from heaven. Instead, they are woven into the steps of another human being, someone you do not yet know, someone who may not even realize they are carrying a divine assignment. God has a way of sending His answers not from the clouds, but through the footsteps of a stranger who appears at the right moment, when your strength is thin and your hope is stretched to its breaking point. We imagine that when we cry out in desperation, God will respond with overwhelming signs that no one could miss. Yet if you study the rhythm of life, you see how often his responses come through the most unexpected channels. The hand that steadies you in a crowded place, the voice that speaks a word of encouragement when you are weary, the stranger who extends kindness in a moment of need. These are not coincidences, but carefully written lines in the story God is telling in your life. He does not waste the details, and he does not leave his children without help. What we call random meetings are often precise moments of providence, crafted long before we saw them coming. Think of the way you have been surprised in the past. Perhaps you are carrying a heavy burden, unsure of how to move forward, and suddenly someone appeared, offering wisdom or support without even knowing your struggle. Perhaps it was a simple gesture, a smile, a kind word, or a willingness to listen, that lifted the weight just enough for you to carry on. That is the mystery of God's ways. He does not always lift the burden in the way you expect, but he will always ensure you are given enough strength through the hands of others. His answers walk beside you, even when you did not ask for them in that form. The difficulty is that we often miss these answers because we are looking for grandeur. We want the heavens to open and the impossible to unfold before our eyes, but God delights in the beauty of subtlety. His ways are higher than ours, and in his wisdom he knows that the most lasting changes come not from spectacles, but from encounters that shape the soul. When he sends help through someone you have never met, he is not only solving your immediate problem, he is also weaving humility, gratitude, and awareness into your character. You learn to see beyond yourself, to recognize that your life is part of a larger tapestry, and that God uses countless threads, some visible and some hidden, to create a story of redemption and hope. Consider the journeys recorded in history, where men and women faced impossible odds and yet found deliverance in unexpected forms. They were not always rescued by armies or by miracles of fire and wind, but by the presence of individuals who appeared at just the right time, guided by a hand unseen. That is no less miraculous than the parting of seas or the falling of fire. In fact, it may be more so, because it reminds us that God governs even the smallest steps of human interaction. He places people on paths that intersect with ours at moments of deepest need, showing us that his reach extends through flesh and blood, through kindness and compassion, through the everyday fabric of life. There is something profoundly humbling in realizing that the stranger who offers you water on a dry day, or the neighbor who speaks encouragement into your weary heart, may be the very vessel of God's response to your prayer. And in turn, there are times when you may be that stranger for someone else, carrying words or actions that you do not even realize are sacred assignments. God's help does not always look supernatural, but that does not make it any less divine. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when touched by his purpose, and the lives of strangers become instruments of his will. To see this clearly requires a shift in perspective. It requires you to slow down, to pay attention, to live with the awareness that nothing is random in the eyes of God. That person you pass by may be carrying the strength you need for today, just as you may unknowingly carry the strength someone else has prayed for. If you close your eyes to the ordinary, you risk missing the extraordinary hand of God working in it. Every act of kindness, every meeting, every unexpected gesture has the potential to be an answer sent from above, dressed in the simple form of another person's humanity. And so, when you ask for help, do not limit your expectations. Do not imagine that it must come in one particular way, through one particular channel. God's answers are far more creative than your imagination. He may not send an angel with wings of light, but he may send a fellow traveller with words that pierce your despair. He may not part the seas for you, but he may place a bridge in the form of a stranger's generosity. His ways are subtle, but they are sure, and his timing is always precise. The stranger who crosses your path may be the very embodiment of God's faithfulness, carrying the answer you have long awaited without even knowing they were chosen for it. We live in a world that often teaches us to believe we must face everything on our own, as though strength is only measured by how well we can carry our burdens without leaning on anyone else. From an early age we are told to stand tall, to solve our problems, to show no weakness, and to fight battles in silence. Yet deep within the human soul there is a quiet recognition that this is not how we were created. We are not meant for isolation, nor were we designed to exist as solitary beings wandering through life without connection. From the very beginning of existence, God's design has always been rooted in relationship, in the weaving together of lives, in the unseen threads that tie one person to another. It is through this divine design that his help often comes, not in lightning bolts from the heavens, but in the form of another person whose path intersects with yours at just the right time. When we pray, we sometimes imagine God will answer us directly, whispering in our ear or appearing in stillness of the night to give us what we long for. But more often than not, his response arrives in the form of someone else. He takes the love, wisdom, or strength that we lack in a given moment and places it inside another heart, arranging the circumstances so that we cross paths at the exact moment we need it. This is why no one can truly claim to be self-sufficient, for even the strongest have found themselves leaning on the encouragement, wisdom, or kindness of another. What looks like coincidence is often providence, and what feels like an ordinary meeting is in fact God's careful orchestration of two lives meant to intersect. You can see this pattern across history and within your own life if you pause to notice. The mentor who appeared just when you needed guidance, the friend who entered your life at the moment loneliness threatened to overwhelm you, the stranger who offered support when you thought no one saw your struggle. All of these are living testimonies to the fact that God sends his help through others. These moments remind us that we are not isolated fragments drifting in chaos. We are part of a grand tapestry where every thread is placed with intention. If you remove one thread, the beauty of the design is diminished. In the same way, if we ignore the people God places around us, we miss the very help we were praying, for there is also great humility in acknowledging that we cannot walk this journey alone. Pride tells us that asking for help is weakness, that receiving from another makes us small. But in reality, it is pride that makes us fragile, while humility allows us to be strengthened. When you accept that God uses others to sustain you, you realize that leaning on someone else does not make you lesser. It makes you part of something greater. The very act of receiving help is not simply about your need being met. It is also about allowing someone else to fulfill their purpose. In God's design, you are not only a receiver of help but also a giver, and when you close yourself off to others, you rob them of the chance to carry out their divine assignment. It is a beautiful mystery that sometimes the people sent into your life may not stay forever. Some are like brief seasons of grace, entering quietly, offering what was needed, and then moving on. Others remain, becoming companions on the longer road. But whether they stay for a moment or a lifetime, the truth remains that they are evidence of God's care. He never abandons his children, and one of the clearest signs of his presence is the presence of another human being who steps in when you thought you could not go any further. These are not just kind people. They are instruments of divine love, even if they never realize it themselves, and if God sends help to you through others, then it follows that he will also send help through you to someone else. Your words, your actions, your presence may be the answer to someone's prayer in ways you cannot comprehend. What may feel to you like a small gesture may be, to someone else, the lifeline they have been begging heaven for. In this way, God's design becomes even clearer. We are not isolated souls trying to survive alone, but living vessels through which his love and strength flow into the world. Each encounter carries weight. Each act of kindness echoes into eternity, and each moment of compassion is a reminder that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. This is why isolation feels so heavy, because it is unnatural to the soul. Loneliness cuts deep not simply because we desire company, but because we were not created to be self-contained. Our lives are meant to intersect, our stories are meant to intertwine, and our hearts are meant to carry each other's burden. God himself has chosen to work through this design. He could act alone, but instead he delights in sending his care through the hands, voices, and lives of others. It is his way of reminding us that we belong to each other, that his kingdom is not built on solitary victories, but on shared journeys. And so, the next time you wonder whether your prayers are being heard, look not only to the sky, but also to the people around you. The answer you are waiting for may not come through a voice from heaven, but through the hand of someone you never expected, carrying the help you desperately need because God chose to weave your life with theirs. At just the right time, help rarely comes in the shape we imagine it will. When we find ourselves in need, when our hearts cry out for relief, we often form pictures in our minds of how God should respond. We expect the solution to look grand, to feel powerful, to arrive in a way that makes sense to us. But the ways of heaven are not confined to our expectations. What we long for may come wrapped in humility, carried by the hands of someone we would never think to notice, spoken in a voice unfamiliar, or given through the kindness of a stranger who does not even know the weight of the burden they are helping to lift. God delights in answering prayers through means that surprise us, because in the surprise our faith learns to grow. It is a natural tendency to overlook the small and the ordinary. Our eyes are trained to look for drama, for spectacle, for signs so clear that no doubt could possibly remain. Yet, when God sends help, it often looks so normal that we risk dismissing it. We think it must be coincidence, or human kindness, or nothing more than chance. But in reality, these are the very fingerprints of God at work. He is not bound to announce his help with trumpets and fire. He is content to let it arrive quietly, dressed in the common garments of human interaction. The stranger who holds the door when you are struggling, the neighbor who offers a word at the right moment, the friend of a friend who suddenly steps into your story with unexpected generosity. These are not accidents, but whispers of divine mercy disguised in simple forms when we fail to recognize this. Disappointment can grow within us. We might think God has not answered, or that he has remained silent in our distress. But silence is not absence, and ordinary is not insignificant. In fact, it is often in the smallest and simplest gestures that his presence becomes clearest. For when help comes in a form we never expected, it shakes us free from the illusion that we can predict or control the ways of God. It humbles us, reminding us that his wisdom is greater than ours, and that he chooses the unexpected not to confuse us, but to deepen our trust. By sending help through strangers, through voices unfamiliar, through acts of kindness that seem unremarkable on the surface, he trains us to look beyond appearances and to trust that his care is always near. Even when it is hidden, consider the way that stories of faith are often filled with unexpected characters, Deliverance does not always arrive through kings or warriors, but through shepherds, widows, travellers, and those who seemed unqualified. The beauty of this pattern is that it shows us something about God's heart. He does not rely on power or prestige to reveal his care. He often chooses what the world calls small, so that we may learn to see his greatness in places we would have ignored. In this way, the stranger who crosses your path with kindness is not simply a stranger. They are evidence that God's mercy can wear any face, speak any language, and come from any direction. Help wrapped in humility has a way of breaking through our pride. When we are low, we sometimes imagine we need something dramatic to restore us, yet what truly restores the soul is often the simplest kindness. A quiet word that tells you not to give up, a small act that shows you are not invisible, a reminder that someone cares enough to notice. All of these carry more weight than grand gestures, and because they come in unexpected ways, they remind us that God's love is not confined to one form. He chooses what will most deeply shape our hearts, and often that is not what dazzles the eyes, but what softens the spirit. It is also important to remember that what seems small to you may be the very thing that saves another. What feels like a minor kindness on your part may be the answer to a prayer someone else was desperate enough to whisper. You may never know the weight of what you gave, but that is the beauty of being part of God's design. Just as strangers can carry his help into your life, you are also called to carry it into the lives of others. You may speak encouragement into someone's darkness without ever realizing it. You may extend a kindness that they will remember long after you have forgotten. And you may be the stranger through whom God wraps his mercy in humility and places it within reach of another weary soul. When you begin to see life this way, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Every encounter carries possibility. Every gesture can be sacred. Every moment may hold the very answer someone has been longing for. You learn not to despise the small things, because you see how God works through them. You learn not to dismiss the people you do not know, because one of them may be carrying the hope you asked for. And most of all, you learn that help coming in unexpected forms is not a sign that God is distant, but a reminder that he is nearer than you thought, moving in ways that exceed your imagination, reminding you that his wisdom is deeper than your own, and showing you that his love can find you even in the smallest, humblest of disguises. Every act of kindness carries within it a mystery greater than we often realize. We are quick to label such things as mere human decency, the natural goodwill of one person toward another, but that explanation rarely captures the depth of what is truly at work. There are moments when a gesture, a word, or even a simple presence carries weight beyond its size, when something within us recognizes that this was more than chance. These are the moments where divine authorship reveals itself quietly, not in blazing miracles or grand spectacles, but in the ordinary goodness of human lives intersecting at the right time. What looks like the hand of a stranger may, in truth, be the hand of God reaching out in subtle form, leaving his signature not in thunder, but in gentleness. When you look back on the hardest seasons of life, it is not always the great, dramatic rescues that stand out. More often, it is the small kindnesses that shine like stars in the night of memory. The meal shared when you were hungry, the encouraging word when despair pressed in, the unexpected generosity that reminded you that you were not forgotten. These things hold a power far beyond their outward appearance. They echo in the soul because they carry the weight of something eternal. They are not random accidents, but threads woven with intention into the fabric of your story. God is not distant in these moments. He is nearer than ever, using the ordinary to display the extraordinary care of his heart, The beauty of seeing divine authorship in kindness is that it transforms the way you view life. Instead of dividing the world into sacred and ordinary, you begin to realize that everything has the potential to be sacred when God is in it. A conversation with a stranger, a helping hand in a time of weakness, a smile that lifts your spirit when you thought no one noticed. These things are not small. They are the handwriting of God etched into everyday life. They remind you that heaven is not always revealed in visions and voices, but in the quiet presence of grace that meets you where you are. Often through the life of another person, it is easy to miss this if you are not paying attention. If you insist that God must answer only in grand ways, you may overlook the quiet ways he is already answering. If you assume that only the spectacular can carry his presence, you may dismiss the ordinary as insignificant. Yet his greatest works are often wrapped in simplicity. The child born in a manger, the carpenter who walked among fishermen, the teacher who washed the feet of his friends. These are not images of grandeur, yet they reveal the depth of divine love. In the same way, the stranger who shows you compassion, or the friend who carries your burden, is no less a messenger of his care. Each moment of kindness carries his mark. Whether you recognize it in the moment or only in hindsight, there is also something profoundly humbling about realizing that God's love is often expressed through people who have no idea they are being used in this way. The person who helps you may never know that their gesture was an answer to prayer. They may walk away unaware of the weight of what they have done, but God sees, and he delights in weaving their actions into your story. And just as others are used to bring his love to you, so too are you invited to be a vessel for others. Your kindness, no matter how small it may seem, may be carrying more eternal weight than you imagine. You may be writing his signature into someone else's life without even realizing it. This is why kindness must never be dismissed as trivial. In a world obsessed with power and achievement, kindness can appear weak, too simple to matter. But kindness is often the most powerful force because it carries within it the presence of God himself. It softens hearts that have been hardened by pain. It restores dignity to those who feel invisible. It renews hope where despair has taken root. And every time you extend it, you become part of a divine story greater than your own. You become the means through which God's authorship is revealed, the ink through which his love writes itself into the pages of another person's life. Looking at kindness this way reshapes not only how you receive it, but how you give it. When you realize that every act of compassion carries the possibility of being divinely orchestrated, you begin to treat even the smallest opportunities with reverence. A word of encouragement, a listening ear, a moment of patience. These things are not wasted. They may be the very thing someone has been waiting for, the very answer they prayed for in silence. And in giving them, you are not only blessing another person, you are allowing God to use you as his instrument, his pen writing hope into the heart of another in the end. Every act of kindness is more than it appears. It is a reminder that God is closer than we think, that his care is not distant but immediate, flowing through human lives with precision and purpose. What seems ordinary is in fact extraordinary. What seems random is in fact intentional, and what seems like simple human kindness is often the unmistakable signature of divine authorship. If you open your eyes to see it, you will find that God has been writing his presence into your life all along, through the quiet, humble, unexpected acts of love that appear just when you need them most. The greatest struggle of the human heart is not believing that God can send help, but recognizing that help when it finally arrives. We spend hours in prayer, nights in worry, and days in longing for an answer. Yet when the answer stands before us, we sometimes fail to see it. This is not because God is silent, but because his ways are different from our expectation. We imagine solutions wrapped in brilliance, shining so clearly that doubt is impossible. Yet the reality is that God often chooses the quiet, the humble,